Hello everybody, this is Stephen Howson. This is Full Time Devils. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Tony Park, Manchester United youth author and historian, and it's time for another youth review. Delighted to have you back, Tony. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has. It's first time this season.
Yeah, and as always, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about with the youth, isn't there? So let's get straight into it. We're going to be talking about Angel Gomes. We're going to be talking about Nicky Butt. We're going to be talking about new signings, and we're going to be talking about what is going on with the under-23s, which is where I'm going to start. Tony, we're rock bottom of the league at time of recording. What's going on?
It's one of those things where you have to ask a number of questions. Question number one, is it a natural place of where we are because of the last 5 years of underdevelopment? When McGuinness was the under-18 coach 2 years ago now that he's left, he was screaming out for investment in the team. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen for a couple of years leading up to that. You could almost argue since the winning of the 2011 FA Youth Cup, we haven't seriously invested at that level. McGuinness goes, McKenna comes in, all of a sudden we're getting Leo Connor, we're getting Nishan Burkhart, we get, the list goes on in terms of the number of players we're getting. Last season we got Puigmal.
But these are 16-year-olds, aren't they?
Absolutely.
These are under 18s. And this was a policy, wasn't it? The very best 16-year-olds from around the world was a stated goal.
That's right.
From Nicky Butt, I think.
That's right. So at the time, you had the academy in some considerable disarray. Ferguson was heading towards the end of his career or his time at the club. So how much of what we're seeing now is a consequence of that underinvestment 5 years ago? And it doesn't matter what else is going on. That was always going to happen. So it could be a part of that. I think the second thing that could be happening is the transfer of managership. We've had Warren Joyce come, Warren Joyce go. We've had someone else come and go. We had Nicky Butt taking over. We had numerous times when there was no manager. Someone was just stepping into the fold, and now Ricky Spraggi has got it. So I think there's been a lot of transition there at leadership level. And then the third thing you can say is, what's the crop of footballers actually like? Is this just a bad crop of kids? And I'm putting this in context. They're professional footballers. Many of them, if not all of them, will probably have careers in the game. But in terms of a composite group, are they just an average to what we're normally used to group of players who haven't quite gelled yet? When we've seen some of the 18s come into the squad from last year, I'm talking to the likes of DJ Buffon and one or two others, they've done really well. They've seemed to put some energy into the team. Other players, you sometimes say, have they made too big a jump? You've got the likes of, I'm using an example here, Charlie Scott, who left the 18s not so long ago. Is the 23s too big a jump for him? I don't know.
It's a 5-year age group,
It's a big issue. It's a big issue. And you're getting that period where the likes of the 19-year-olds, the 20-year-olds, who are still 3 years younger than the maximum, some of those guys are out on loan. The Regan Pools and the Devonte Redmonds and what have you, they're out on loan. Then you've got, and Matty Willock. Then you've got some of the 18s who are probably, a little bit not quite ready for that. You've probably got some players not really clear what their positions are. Is Charlie Scott a centre half? Is he a midfielder? Is he a fullback? They seem to play him all over the place. I'm using him as an example because he just hasn't got a lot of game time. And so you have to question how they develop. And then they come into the team, and all of a sudden they're expected to perform. And Stephen, they're under a little bit of pressure because we're bottom of the league.
Not only that, they're wearing a Manchester United badge, which always brings pressure.
So I think where we are now is a composite of numerous problems, not just one thing. You put all that together, and you've got what you've got. There's been a lot of talk on some of the social media platforms about, is Spraggi the right guy? He certainly was in 2005, 2006, 2007. We were winning leagues, winning cups.
But even under Warren Joyce, this team went from being champions to just avoiding relegation last season.
I think the other problem, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's the fourth issue, I think the other three are the big issues, but the fourth problem we've got in that team is we don't have a striker. And we've not had a striker in the reserves or under 23s or under 21s.
All wingers. Which is huge, I think.
And the wingers we do have, the Joe Rileys and the Dimitri Mitchells, we then play them at fullback. So it's a really bizarre process where you look at, we're not getting stuffed every week. We're losing 2-1, 3-2, 1-0. It's not like we're losing 4 and 5-0 and being stupid.
Uninspiring, isn't it?
Very uninspiring. Almost. But it's uninspiring for a Man United team because we haven't got that traditional bombing forward. Well, how can we? We're now 2 wingers are playing fullbacks. James Wilson, who's probably one of the best strikers we've had at the club, is being consistently injured with his ankle or his cruciate, whatever the case may be. So he's trying to come back into form, and I think he's struggling a little bit to do that. You add all that together and you're saying, where the goal's going to come from? And no disrespect to the midfielders in that team or some of the other players, none of them are goal scorers. So,
and we've also, let's not forget, we've also got our very best players. The likes of Matty Willock, Fosu-Mensah, Pereira out on loan.
Yep.
And then you've got other players that, okay, Marcus Rashford's now cemented himself as a first teamer. Marcus Rashford would be playing at this level. Even, to be honest, like you could play Luke Shaw and Martial at this level on a consistent basis. McTominay, who didn't exactly pull trees up last season, is now jumping in the first team.
Yeah.
He would make a difference to this team if he was allowed to play at this level, and I think that's a bit of an issue. This was started...
Tuanzebe.
Exactly, yeah, Tuanzebe, who has played at this level this season, but he's in and out of the team because he's required by the first team. Scudamore started the Under-23 league after saying the average age that everybody makes their Premier League debut is 23. Well, that for me is dumbing down of the Premier League. You should be making it harder, not easier. You should be forcing clubs to get these players in earlier. I think someone at Manchester City stated that 80% of the Champions League semi-finalists made their debut as a teenager. Now, aren't we looking at that as elite level footballers and saying teenagers is where you make your debut versus the Premier League are saying, oh, it's 23? Because this extra couple of years is where United are coming unstuck against older, stronger opposition, not necessarily better, and that's where we're coming unstuck. Because if you look, the last time we won the league, it was under 21s.
Sure.
And I think that extra 2 years allows a lot of fluff, because we send our best players out on loan. If you're still at United at 21, 22, 23, it's because we think you're going to be a world-class footballer, like Pereira, like Fosu-Mensah, so we're going to let you go out on loan. If you're 22, 23 and you're at United and you're not in the first team, guess what? I've got news for you, it's not going to happen.
I think that's true, and in some respects, when Scudamore came up with that, it was, I was kind of shaking my head, thinking it might be 23 at other clubs, but it's not 23 at Man United. Our history of putting youth in the team.
It's 21 of the latest.
It's the latest. I mean, we don't have to go back that far. You go back to someone like Andy Ritchie, who's in the 70s and 80s. So, okay, it might be far for a lot of people, but it's not that far. He made every single one of his first team appearances for Man United before he was 20 years old. We sold him as a 19-year-old. So he was one who didn't make it, and he had like 50 appearances under his belt. Duncan Edwards played for it's a bit different, special caliber. He played 100 times before he turned 20. So you've got these players before they're even 21. They've got 50, 60 games under their belt.
If you're 22, 23, and you haven't made a debut,
it's too late.
It's not happening for you.
Now, what you will have is you'll have outliers.
Lingard.
And people like Lingard and Tom Cleverley to some extent. So those players, they would be making their Premiership debuts at 23, 24, but they had physicality issues, they might have had emotional, I don't mean they are emotional, but emotionally dealing with maturity, exactly. The maturity to deal with that. So they went out, I think Cleverley had a great year at Watford, came back.
They went on loan and played first team football, so it's still making a Premier League debut or a Championship level debut. And I think that's the
And Welbeck and Evans before them had a season each at Sunderland.
Antwerp as well.
At Antwerp. So, and we're still doing that. I think what it seems to me, everybody's talking about pathways at the moment. And I think people get confused between an infrastructure and a pathway. So the infrastructure's there. I think it's how you use the infrastructure. I'm not sure we have a clear idea about how we're using the infrastructure. I know we have development plans for each of these players. I know that for a fact. So when I speak to people, they say they have development plans. But when does someone go out on loan? Who do they go on loan to? How long do they go for? What? Curiously, why does Matty Willock going to Holland, but no one else has gone to Holland? I mean, Chris Eagles did some years ago, and you just think, is there an actual plan, or is it proactive or is it reactive?
Yeah, did Utrecht come in for Matty Willock and we went, okay,
exactly,
rather than us trying to find a club of a certain stature?
And you've got that 5-year period, Stephen, where you're talking about, and everyone's going to develop differently in that 5 years. So of the players, and we've got, I think, 24 players at reserve level. Well, we only play twice a month. To sort of summarise your initial question, I think some of it is underinvestment historically. we're paying the price. Some of it is your point about wingers and my point about using Wilson as the lone striker.
There's 7, 8 strikers and 8 defenders in a team last year. It was mental.
And Warren Joyce, people will say, well, Joyce had that issue. Yeah, but he wasn't winning 5-0 either. He was scrounging out 1-0 wins. It wasn't great to watch. So we've got Wilson perennially injured. And still not at his best, and so I still think this could be a psychological thing there. We're not playing with any width. Spradge's come back into the role and saying, "Hell, what do I do?" And there doesn't seem to be the right infrastructure in place to support that whole process. So I think, as far as the reserve stroke under 23s are going to go, I think it's going to be a tough season. I have no idea where we're going to finish up. I really don't. Anything's possible. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think pointing the finger at any one thing, I think, is probably a little bit too insular. I think there's a number of factors. Yeah,
I agree on that. Let's talk about a couple of the players. So you mentioned James Wilson. James Wilson scored, as at time of recording, 3 goals in 6 games. It has been good to see him back, but you're right, he hasn't been able to get any sort of consistency. How do you think he's doing this season since he's been back?
Danny Rose, I'm changed subject for a second. Danny Rose wrote in the Sunday papers, I don't know if you saw it, how he'd been seeing a psychologist because having had such a bad injury when he was flying, if you like, really affected his mental state. And he said it surprised him because he was a footballer, he was strong and all the rest of it. But he said he was surprising how much it affected him. And I thought that was a really interesting statement for a whole bunch of reasons. And it got me thinking about James Wilson. And I saw James at the academy, the Carrington Centre, a couple of weeks ago when he was getting on the bus. I was leaving after watching the 18s, and he just happened to walk past me as I was heading to my car. And he knows me from before. And I said, "How are you fit? You well?" And he was very positive, feel strong, feel great. So good luck. And that was it. So on the outside, he seems really up for it, and he seems bigger and stronger, and that's all great. But when I watch him play, I don't know that if there's a 50-50 or there's something there, it almost seems like he's got something at the back of his mind, which is very natural, to say, I'm not going to give it my all. I'm not saying he's playing at 90%, but I don't think we're seeing the best. Yeah.
He was absolutely fearless.
I know.
And that's why he was so good, because he wasn't big, he wasn't strong, he was Giggs-ish in how he would float around the pitch and quick because he was agile, but he wasn't like quick because he was like this machine or anything like that. And yeah, there doesn't seem that sort of freedom about him at the moment.
No, and I don't know if that's a psychological thing where he's holding back a little bit. I don't know if it's he's worried about getting hurt. I don't know if it's a psychological thing about he's out of form.
Has he lost a yard?
Has he lost a yard of pace, and he recognises that, and he's worried about that? I don't know. Or is it we're just being completely unfair to the lad? He's been out for however long. Yeah. We just got to give him some time
and not getting the service from an underperforming team as well.
Absolutely, and you add all that together, and oh great, Wilson's back. We're going to start scoring goals. Well, yeah, he has 3 and 6, but it's not anywhere near as prolific as he could be.
It was basically a goal a game guaranteed, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I think. For me personally, I think what some of the listeners and the viewers should be really looking for is let's just hope that he can get through the season uninjured, find his form, get his confidence back, and let's look at him. Let's base our opinions on him next season. I don't think we're going to get a lot from him this season because it's been such a horrific injury he's coming back from.
Agreed. And just let's put it on record as well, by the way. James Wilson was one of the best finishers we've ever seen at this club.
Better than Rashford,
undoubtedly.
Better than Gomes.
But people think that because Rashford's having a better career doesn't mean that.
No. But James Wilson is probably one of the most naturally talented finishers I've ever seen at the club. More so than Will Keane before him. You have to go back a long. The only player I've seen, I think, if I'd have to go back to Giuseppe Rossi. Who in 2004-05
wasn't quite as prolific as Wilson, no?
No, he wasn't. But he had that same. As he matured, he was deadly in front of goal. And Wilson was good in the air. He could run onto balls. He had a very strong game. So yeah, so it's been a good 10 years since we've had anybody like him, and I think we've missed him.
Scott McTominay, he's doing pretty well in the first team.
I think he's doing great. I think it's another classic example of. A player who's off the radar, and if you go through our history, there's loads of them. Darren Fletcher is one, comes into the side.
I think Darren Fletcher's the perfect sort of analogy for Scott McTominay.
He got so much.
Although actually, Fletcher at 16 was actually there was a lot of raving about Fletcher.
Yeah, and rightly so. Fletcher, one of the greatest youth players I saw, but he had a lot of injuries. He came into the first team. He was played out of position. He didn't look his best. He was being compared to Beckham. He was getting criticised for that. The fans got on his back, and there was huge question marks about. So what? This is and lots of raving about it. So don't see anything here at all. What is this kid? So there was lots of question marks being raised about Fletch. And I think the same with McTominay. McTominay's come in and people are saying, I've seen stuff where people say he's only being picked because he's tall, which is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life. Mourinho likes tall players. No. He likes all sorts of players, as you can see by who's in the team. He likes players who are effective. And if you're an effective player, you'll get a game. And I was absolutely delighted for Scott because he's worked really hard and he's a consummate professional. He's worked really hard at every aspect of his game. And I thought against Benfica at Old Trafford, I thought we saw him in one of his best ever games at that level, where he did everything simply and easily. He intercepted, he gave the ball, short passes, and then as the game progressed, he got more confidence, started making some forward runs. He had a crack on goal in the last 5 or 10 minutes. And I thought to myself, he could have easily been in with man of the match in terms of his control of the game. I thought he was perfect. He did perfect what Mourinho did. And what Mourinho likes, he likes tactically disciplined players. That's why I liked Fellaini. Fellaini is tactically disciplined.
Who don't make mistakes as well.
Who don't make mistakes. And McTominay comes in. Is he at the same calibre as some of these other players? Clearly not. He's a young lad. He hasn't had the experience yet. That'll come. But he's mature. He's articulate. He is tactically astute and tactically disciplined. The one thing that he will learn as he gets more games is how to be more confident, to impress himself on the pitch a bit more, communicate more strongly on the pitch, telling other people what to do. And he hasn't developed that side of his game yet, but he's very grounded, taking one game at a time. And good luck to him. I think he's a great player. Not great in terms of skills and all the rest of it. I think he's a great addition to the squad. It'll be interesting to see what happens at Bristol City. Whether he brings any of the kids in. He played McTominay, he played Tuanzebe, he played Rashford. I think Lingard was on the bench. Lingard played. Pereira was on the bench.
And like they always have done, didn't put a foot wrong, any of them.
No, Tuanzebe had a really good game, I thought, against Swansea.
I thought he was in with a shout of breaking into the team on the back of that performance.
As I say, I think Mourinho plays the tried and tested players. The other thing, and I have to be fair, I think Smalling and Jones have played really well so far this season. They haven't put a foot wrong. Bailey's, in real terms, Bailey's been very good. They've made a couple of mistakes here and there that's cost us, absolutely, but that's football. So he's probably very reluctant to throw a Tuanzebe in there, and he's probably very reluctant to throw Demi Mitchell in there. As I say, I think things have conspired against Demi in terms of the reserves not doing so well, the under-23 is not doing so well. He's been in and out of different positions that have probably not helped him very well.
Especially when you're trying to learn a position.
I think so. I mean, people forget he's only been doing that less than half a season.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably not played. I bet he's still not played 20 games as a left back, and one of them being a first team one, where he kept Zaha quiet, which has got to be the nightmare for someone learning the defensive side of the game to try and keep this dude quiet. One of the most agile, crazy wingers that you can find.
I think you're right, and Demi knows that, I guess, and he's had a few injuries in the past, so he's going to be biding his time and waiting for his opportunity. And again, he's a smart kid. He's been around the scene a long time, so I'm not surprised, but I don't see any concerns around that at all.
All right, let's talk about the youth league then, because currently United sit top of the group somehow, because we was very fortunate against what's a brilliant Benfica side, managed to steal a draw, and I think that's fair to say in both the games, the home and away game with Benfica. But a couple of good wins against Basel and CSK Moscow sees us top in the group. How far do you think United can go in this?
Clearly, I think we'll get through to the next stage for the first time.
It's in our hands. We beat Basel and CSK, we win the group.
Yeah, and I think, was it the top two go through? So
it's very complicated. So the top team goes through straight into the knockout. The teams that come second go into a playoff against all of the other sides in Europe. So there's a lot of other ways to qualify for the Youth League, and I think there's 64 teams in it. There might be 64 teams in the playoff, which is its own little knockout competition, just to get to play the second place teams in a group stage, which obviously mimics what the first team group stage looks like. And then from there, I believe it's a one-legged knockout draw all the way to the final, which is in Zurich in April.
Right, so given all that,
But if you win the group, you go straight to that knockout stage.
well, as you say, it's in our hands. There shouldn't be any reason why we can't win the group, particularly as we've got one of those games are at home. So we should be in a good position. Whether we do or whether we don't, I still think we'll progress in some capacity. I'm not sure this links on to the conversation we were having earlier about the quality, or the gap between 18s and 23s. And that 19 group that Nicky Butt's been looking after. I still think there's some gaps in the group. There's some players that are missing. I mean, obviously, Angel's not played a couple of games because he's been away with England and whatnot.
Looked fantastic. He came on for the last half an hour against Benfica. And
yeah.
First thing he does is outside of the football over the top to someone, and he just like...
But again, I'll go back to one of my points. I still think we're lacking a true striker at that stage. I thought Josh Bowie did fantastically well away from home, and he scored a couple of goals. But I don't necessarily see him as a prolific striker. Burkhart's not been getting the games in that level. We don't seem to play that game to get him involved.
He's played out wide for the 19s quite a lot, rather than down the middle.
Yeah, and again, we go back to your point about width. We're not really playing with width outside of the 18s. 18s we are, but outside the 18s, not so much.
But Boonan's been banned, Chong's been injured.
All that stuff.
There's reasons for it, but yeah.
Absolutely. So we haven't looked that impressive in some of the games going forward, but we've looked solid in midfield and we've looked very solid at the back. So I think, will we go all the way? That would surprise me. I don't know if we've got the quality against some of the other teams to go all the way. Will we be in the mix? Potentially, but certainly we'll be in the competition for a wee while longer.
I think last 8, better look last 4. I think
maybe yeah, if we get to the last 4, that would surprise me with the squad. But then, as you say, if Chong comes back and he's performing, if Gomes is into the team and he's performing, if one or two other things happen and we get some momentum going, anything can happen.
Don't know what the situation is with our new signing. I think we should touch on the new signing now. So we've just signed from Benfica, Embalo. I watched him this week actually against England for Portugal. He got sent off against some of the lads, and we'll get to that in a second. This kid looks exciting. Have you seen much of him?
Obviously he's been on our radar for some time. So for those people who are on certain forums, they'll see the name being bandied around. He came on as a substitute against us in Benfica last week in the UEFA youth game. I think he came on after 68 minutes or 65 minutes or something. So we saw half an hour of him and he wasn't really given a chance to do anything special. And I was watching, as soon as he came on, I thought, let me just watch what happens here. But I didn't see anything of any significance to say, wow. But obviously our scouts have been looking after him for some time and the reports have been incredibly positive.
He's got more than a goal a game over 30 games, so it's not just a short period of time. At the youth levels, he's been playing at 17s, 18s, 16s for Portugal. He's a bit of an inverted winger, a striker, looks very raw, looks like an absolute handful. Yeah, a real handful that's super direct. Could be a massive addition to the side, especially as we're pushing forward and put a bit of pressure on Chong in that side. If Chong's on one side, he's on the other, and you've got Burkhart up front, that's a deadly forward 3, I think, potentially. So very exciting for the new signing. And I believe Real Madrid offered 10 million for him in the summer, which is huge. For a huge amount of money for a player this age. And they also signed that Brazilian, didn't they, for 40 plus million. So if that's the sort of ballpark we're talking about, we don't know how much United have paid for this kid at the moment. That might break soon. But this seems to be a big signing that United have gambled big on, I think. So keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we were alluding to earlier, that the club now, from a philosophy perspective, is looking at investing outside of the UK.
Well, from Fosu Mensah onwards, really, we've had one real big one even a couple of big ones with Puigmal, with O'Connor, with Chong, all of these players, Burkhart.
Traore.
Traore. These are all players that they're definitely investing in 16-year-olds, which I think is a really good age to really start.
I agree.
Playing our hand, I think.
And one of the things that, I don't care what anybody says, it's just a fact. And I don't know if you saw the Crane report on Twitter the other week, where the guy, I've forgotten his first name, his last name's Crane, he did an analysis of all the academies and how successful they've been and how many players from each academies are playing around the UK and so forth. And United came out with 70 different players playing in the UK in professional football. And some of the points he was making was around, you know, why would someone go to one academy and not in another academy? And you had the likes of Newcastle and Liverpool much lower, and I think Swansea were a Premier League club, and they were 90th out of 92 clubs. It was really, so why would you send anybody to Swansea given that only 2 players have come through their youth system into the first team? And that's what I talk about, you know, with pathway. So you don't also know with Real Madrid, they haven't got a great record of buying kids and then fast tracking them into the first team in the same way that, you know,
well, like we do, let's face it.
Like we do, certainly.
Often criticised for it, but we do.
No, we do. And that's been shown. And people say, yeah, but it's only in this circumstance and that circumstance. And I go, what a load of complete rubbish. Doesn't matter the circumstances. We continually do it. Other clubs are in similar circumstances and they don't do it. And that's all to do with ethos and philosophy. So we also don't know how much of that's been part of the package, where they've been saying to him, look, you will get a chance, we will fast track you. If you continue to grow, you'll be in the first team playing in the Champions League at 17, 18 years old. That's only 2 years down the track, you know, or whatever the story is. And then you don't know how much the player has involved saying, I don't want to go to Madrid, I want to go to United. And people say, you know, United don't have the same pull as Madrid. That's just not true when it comes to youth level, because kids just want to play football. And they see, and you talk to kids, why are you United? And you see their parents on the sidelines and they're City fans. And you say, why is your kid here? And they say, he'll get a better chance here. And if the parents who support other clubs are saying that, he'll get a better chance here, then you're thinking, they're not in it for the money, they're in it because their boy wants to play football.
Yeah, which is always good to hear.
It's great to hear.
Speaking of attracting players, one of the ones that we mentioned a second ago, Arnau Puigmal, the Spanish lad. Wonder kid is the term that all the newspapers was using prior to us signing him in the summer. I haven't seen him live myself. I've only seen a little bit of highlights. He's played 2 public games, I think. You've seen him live. What's your thoughts?
He's a lovely player. He central midfielder, but also he can play out wide. He's got that ability, which most central players they can do that. They can switch. Great on the ball. Good vision. An eye for goal. He scored against Newcastle from a free kick.
I've seen the free kick,
which most people saw. Very good free kick down at the cliff. And then obviously he played again, and he was quieter. He didn't have the same influence on the game at Stoke as he did in the Newcastle game. What also has been happening, he's been away a lot on international duties, so he's been playing for Spain regularly. And Kieran McKenna's had him on the bench a couple of times. So at Sunderland, when we were 1-0 down and we won 2-1, he was on the bench. I think when we played Middlesbrough 1-6-2, he was on the bench. And the only reason for that is simply trying to fit so many players into the system, but also resting players when they've played 1 and 2 games over the course of a couple of weeks for their country. So O'Connor came back from Ireland, he was rested. Puigmal came back from Spain, he was rested. Galbraith came back from Northern Ireland, he was rested. So he's doing that. We clearly haven't seen enough of him, but the signs look fantastic. He looks a player, and he looks a playmaker, which is really important, because I think if you look at our first team, and you progress to the next.
What's missing at the moment?
Well, you saw the game at Chelsea, and it just, the commentators were screaming at it. Someone put your foot on the ball, calm things down, and start to maintain possession, and let's not just keep booting it all over the place. And he's that type of player. He's a playmaker. He can see a pass. He's creative. He seems very composed. I'll say it. He just reminds me a little bit of what Pereira was like 2 or 3 years previously. But we just haven't seen enough of him yet. So fingers crossed, looks like a good buy. I think he's going to add some real value, but time will tell.
A couple of years ago, and I think we spoke about it on air a few times, the emergence of Angel Gomes had everybody at the club excited. I've not seen anything like the excitement that we are now seeing with Mason Greenwood. This is a kid that I believe could overtake Gomes in acceleration to getting into the first team, merely because of his size, because I think he's 6 foot already. He's quite slight, but he's definitely going to fill out into a bigger frame. A genuine 2-footed player, because there's not a lot of genuine 2-footed players. But when you speak to him, so I can't remember who I spoke to and said, how do you know a 2-foot player? And he says, ask him what foot they take a penalty with. I asked Mason what foot he take a penalty with, and he goes, whichever one I feel like. Genuine 2-footed player.
Well, he takes corners with both feet. So if you watch the game, he will take a corner, and depending on how he feels, he'll take one with his left and he'll take one with his right. That's 2-footed player.
Can I just say as well, this is a player, we have got a stacked 18s at the moment. As you mentioned, internationals, left, right and centre. this is an under-16. This is a player that still is 2 years younger than Angel Gomes at level, and he's forced his way into this side at the moment, hasn't he?
Well, you know, I think as long as you provide the right infrastructure, you know, you've got 18s to 19 at youth level, the European youth level, then you've got 23s, then you've got the first team and what have you, got loans going on. You know, we have an infrastructure at the club. If a player's good enough, they will find, you know, we use the word pathway, they will find their own pathway through that. That's what Mason Greenwood's doing. He's saying, I'm going to play so well and I'm going to prove myself better than everyone else that it's now going to be impossible for you not to play me, because there's no reason not to play me. And he's doing it. Now, I watched him in the under-16s last year, and he was okay. Okay, I really mean it. He was okay. I saw him at the tournament in Holland, the Otten Cup, and he'd shot up over the summer. And players do this, Stephen. You know, the young players that just physically, and he'll continue to do this. Every couple of seasons, you'll come back in the September and you go, who's that? And someone will say Greenwood. You say, no, he's smaller than that. It can't be Greenwood. And you go, no, it's Greenwood. Look at him. God, he's 2 inches bigger this way. He's 4 inches bigger this way. And you say he's 6 foot. They just have these spurts. And he came back from the summer break, and you're thinking, wow, he looks something. And United took him and Anthony Elanga, who were pretty much similar last year for the 16s. And it was chalk and cheese. Anthony hasn't developed physically yet, therefore he's still playing in the 16s. Mason has done tremendously well. Clearly we don't know what's happening in training, but you can only assume that he's doing as he's told because he's playing regularly. He became the youngest ever person to score a hat-trick for our under-18.
Beating Gomez's record.
Beating Gomez's record, and that's in the history of the whole club. That's going back to the Bobby Charltons and the Dennis Violets and all these players.
George Best.
All of those players, Bestie was a winger, but all of those strikers...
But wouldn't you say, because I think he's best played out wide, a bit more of an inverted style winger. I don't like him as a number 9.
I think he's good enough to play anyway, certainly at this level, which is great because he's got that versatility. Because he's 2-footed, he has a sight for goal, he can drift out wide, he can pass the ball, he's ticking lots of boxes. But yeah, he to score a hat-trick at 16 years old...
I think it was, he just turned 16.
It was just... It's phenomenal, and I was doing someone asked me the question on Twitter. They said, is there, and I said, there's got to be someone younger in our history with the Busby Babes and all the rest of it. There's got to be someone. So I've gone back to 1938, and there isn't anyone. This kid's the youngest to score a hat-trick. So, and that was only on his second full game. So, we've got something special here. I think it's right that you say you're hearing a lot of vibe about it. Hopefully that vibe doesn't turn into overhype, because as you know, that can happen. Yeah,
I'm driving the bandwagon at the moment.
But yeah, I think it's great that we've got a star in the show, and I think what's really important is that Kieran's given him a chance. They're putting him in the team.
It's a meritocracy, and he's keeping it.
That's what I'm saying. At our place, if you're good enough, you'll get a chance. That's the infrastructure. That's the ethos. And the other thing is England have picked up on it. And
I'm going to get to that in a second, actually, because there's a little bit of a change happened at England, and that's one of the things I'm definitely going to talk about. But I think, as a last line on Mason, I think what's very good is he's not coming in as a superstar, in a team of grey elephants. He's coming in as a pink elephant in a troop of pink elephants. There's so many potential superstars in this team that McKenna's doing well to get them to play together, and it's elevating all of them. We saw it a little bit last year. I thought the midfield three of Whelan, Buffon and Gomes was fantastic. And I think there's a chance that we can do that again this year. And, if you're an opposition team, who are you going to pick up? You're going to pick up Burkhart? Okay, you might keep him quiet today. Gomez is going to hurt you. Okay, we're going to keep Gomez quiet. Greenwood's going to hurt you. And then when we get Chong back, you've got, who you picking up? You're picking up Chong, the new lad, Embalo. There's so many dangerous players going forward, and we've got some solid players at the back.
The under-18s is looking pretty exciting, particularly when we had a few seasons where it wasn't so great. And last season we had a very good season. We finished second. And this year we're playing really well. I think we're up there again near the top of the league behind City. We've only lost twice this season, once in the league and once in the cup. So things are looking really strong. And
currently top of the league, yeah.
Yeah, and there's one or two others in the 16s who are looking pretty good. There's, without naming names, there's of course Mengi, Teden Mengi made his under-18 debut just last week. He was brought into the team, came off the bench and he's a decent footballer. play centre half. And there's 2 or 3 others whose names I won't mention, obviously, who are playing really well in the 16s. A couple coming back from injury. And so it looks good.
Chong is one that's coming back from injury at the moment. I'll glass over this one a little bit because we don't know what's going to happen once he comes back. But he's been a miss, I think, in the team. And he was on fire before his injury at the end of last season, wasn't he?
Yeah, he scored a lot of goals. But I think the other thing that Chong gave to our team at that time was balance. So you had a number of players. You had Gomes in the middle, as you were saying. You had Indy Boonen on one side at the time. You had Chong on the other side. You had Burkhart up front with 1 or 2 others who would come in. There was 1 or 2 other players who would... Barlow, AD Barlow would sometimes come in and play up front. So you had this really nice balance. And I think we'd been lacking that balance the previous couple of seasons. So when Taith got injured, I think it upset our balance a little bit towards the back end of the season. And you probably found that out when we didn't do so well in the playoffs against those sides. We just seemed imbalanced to some degree. And Angel got injured and 1 or 2 things happened. So I think when he comes back, he will give us another really nice balance to that wide position.
I love how aggressive he is because he's super direct. Yeah, super direct. Nissan Burkhart, I think it was 2 seasons ago, probably a little over 2 seasons ago. It might have been when we'd signed him. Me and you did a video talking about Nissan Burkhart. Absolute goal machine was the word, and everything we'd been hearing from Zurich. We've seen him now at Old Trafford at Carrington for a season. Pretty underwhelming last season, pretty ordinary, not bad, just didn't really stand out this season. He didn't score in the last game, so I think that puts him at 6 goals, 6 assists in 10 games, which is a hell of a record.
Well, I think a couple of things. Firstly, he's a young lad. You come into a different country, a different culture. I think he obviously spoke the language, which helps. So he settles. By the way, he's very well liked at the club. The other players really respect him and stuff. And
fastest player at the club.
Yeah, he's so quick. And I think he was learning how to play a certain game in FC Zurich, and the game that he played was running onto the ball.
He was played as a wide forward in the style that you might see Neymar or something played.
So he was continually running onto the ball. His game is not back to goal, holding up the game. And at first, that was the type of play we were doing. We were slowing the game down, even to not being unfair to Angel. Angel would slow the game down. And that's not Burkhart's game. So in some respects, we weren't playing to his strengths. When we did play to his strengths, he scored goals. I think what you're seeing this season is we're playing with width. And width, particularly from the fullbacks. So I've counted on 3 occasions where Brandon Williams is playing left back. And he'll get the ball, or he'll beat his man, or he'll move forward, and all of a sudden he'll bomb straight for the edge of the penalty box. What he doesn't do is he doesn't cut in, he just bombs forward, a traditional wingers type of play, Kanchelskis-like if you like. And then he crosses, and Burkhart, that's his game. And if you watch his goals this season, he's running onto the ball. And then when he's running onto the ball, it's going in the back of the net. That's his game. And so what we're seeing his predatory instincts, which is one of his strengths, his pace, as you've mentioned, which is his strength, and his confidence in front of goal. We're seeing all that now come into fruition. And he's a year older, and he's got used to the physical side of the game, because people coming into the league, even at first team level, takes them a good year to get used to it. And so I think what we're seeing now is the best of him, because all of those elements are now taking shape, and all those elements are being factored in. And I think his teammates know how to play to his strengths. See, and we had that conversation saying, watch this kid, I think he's going to be very good. I still think he'll be very good. He's still quite small. I don't think he's nowhere near as big as Greenwood or some of the others. So it'll be really interesting to...
Similar height to me, I think.
Yeah, so how old are we?
I'm 5'10".
5'10", yeah. So for a striker, that's still pretty small. So it's going to be interesting to see how he develops physically over the next couple of years, because he knows where the back of the net is. He's incredible pace, very direct. He's a team player, so he ticks a lot of boxes. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he develops. It might not be massively quick and dynamic like some people expect. It just might be slow and steady. But I think he's a good little player.
Yeah, and I think not this season. Maybe next season, because I think the U23 league will bore the piss out of him. But I think maybe next season he might benefit from a loan somewhere, like a championship team, somewhere he's going to have to fight like that, because I think his attributes could be really useful in a championship side.
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
World Cup, Our captain won the World Cup and captained it.
I'll tell you what's great, Stephen. We've had a couple of years now, maybe 3 or 4 years, where for whatever reason, whether it's political, whether it's quality, whether it's just timing, whatever the case may be, where our youngsters have not got a chance at international level. You've had the odd player like Dean Henderson's got a chance, or
Tuanzebe had a little bit of a chance.
Yeah, Axel and Demi Mitchell got a little bit of a try, but I remember back in, you go back 5 years, 10 years or so, the England youth squads were full of Man United players. I remember doing, putting squad lists together and research, and it would take hours because there were so many players. You go through Rothmans at the end of the years. The 16s were full of United players, the 17s, the 18s, the 19s. And in the last few years, it's been blank. There's just been, I think, one season we only had one player, which was Dean Thompson, the season before last, who was anywhere near an England squad. And you have to say, why? Why is that happening? It just doesn't make sense, because the players are clearly good players. And this year has just seen a proliferation. Not just, Wales with Dylan Levitt and Scotland with Ethan Hamilton and the Spanish we mentioned and some of the other players, Burkhart with Zurich and Boonen with Belgium. But isn't it fantastic that we're now getting a whole bunch of England players? Whether you like England or don't like England, I'm not particularly bothered. What I'm bothered about is it's another stage of these boys' development. It's another set of experiences to go to these places. And there was, 50, 60, 70,000 people in Kolkata for the final?
Yeah.
There was huge crowds,
Yep.
huge interest in India, which must be a great thing for the World Game. But more importantly, to have someone like Angel, captain the team, be responsible from a maturity perspective of leading England in a tournament in front of 60 or 70,000 people each game. That's just fantastic.
Yep. And like I said, that England side was, I think it was a bit of a knocking bet that they was going to be there or thereabouts in that. This is a real good side. Obviously, you've got Foden from City, Sancho now at Dortmund. There's some absolute top draw players in there. And the pick of the bunch is arguably our boy Angel as well.
Well, I mean, Brewster from Liverpool got all the starlights because clearly he scored a couple of hat tricks and he scored in the final, and bravo to the kid. You have to be there and you have to do your job, and so he was getting a lot of kudos for doing that. And Foden, obviously the City boy, he's been taken on their pre-season tour, so he was in the limelight. For whatever reason, Angel played in the opening games. He scored a goal, as you know. He scored that free kick in the 4-0 win. And then he didn't play for a couple of games, and so you question what was going on. But it must be a great experience, and obviously he came on at the end and was able to lift the trophy. And there's not many times you can say a Manchester United player has lifted a World Cup.
So that whole team now has been promoted, that under-17 side, and maybe a little bit of a surprise at the names that was called up for the England boys, for the under-17s this week. I went and watched them against Portugal, and all of them played fantastic, it has to be said. And that's Ethan Laird, Mason Greenwood, as we've spoken about already, and Jimmy Garner. And they all played absolutely fantastic. Credit to both England and Manchester United. Where do you think it's going to go for them, lads? Do you think there's anyone that was close on missing out? You mentioned Brandon Williams. I think he's very close to Ethan Laird. I'm surprised one got called up without the other, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's where the politics come in. I mean, I remember talking to a youth player some years ago, and I said, you got picked for England. Why didn't they pick this guy? And he says,
don't want too many from one club.
They don't want too many from one club. They don't want to be seen to be favouring one team over another. So what they try to do is they try to spread it around a little bit. Now, you have to ask, what's your objective? Is your objective to win trophies?
Are we playing grassroots under sevens here? What's going on? Yeah.
Is your objective to win trophies, or is your objective for football development? And to a less or large extent, what you might say is in some of the friendly games, I think there is value in experimentation in some of the friendly games. So this was a friendly game against Portugal. There's value in experimentation. When you're getting to World Cup games, I think even at that level, you have to say, no, we have a squad. It's going to be our best squad.
This is the best lot.
And if the best lot includes 5 players from one club, then so be it. That's how it works. You want the best, and you want to praise meritocracy. And I think this is the real challenge for a lot of youth environments is how do you get that balance between giving everybody a chance, which is the environment you create, but then letting everybody naturally develop in their own way. Like Mason Greenwood, he'll find his own pathway. He'll force his own way through that team through sheer hard work, sheer brilliance, sheer performance on the pitch, meritocracy, and no one can argue that he doesn't deserve his spot. I think what upsets fans and certainly upsets the players is when they know that they deserve a chance and they're not getting a chance because someone's getting their turn. That must be incredibly frustrating. But going back to the three players, maybe Brandon will get a chance in one of the next friendly games, and they'll drop Ethan. But I think Ethan's done great. He was great at the Auckland Cup. He had a really good season in the 16s last year. So that's hardly a surprise for me.
Ethan was leading scorer at one point last year for the under-16s, and he's a left back. He's
a strong player, very confident, technically very good, positionally, tactically very good. So he's got a chance to really cement a place in the 18s this season, and clearly with England, he's on their radar as well. Jimmy Garner's an interesting player. He was our under-16 captain last year. Very nice player, very compact player, again, disciplined, aggressive, keeps the game moving, can change a game with just his energy. When he started in the 18s this year, he really struggled, in my opinion. It was a bit more physical for him. He's very slight, as you know. But over the last 3 or 4 games, I'm seeing him stamp his authority on the game.
He looked big in that England side.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the cut of the England shirt, but I was like, what's going on there with him? Because I didn't think it was him at first. So I could only tell it's him because of his haircut.
Absolutely.
But I was like, is that? I couldn't tell if it was him. I was like, I couldn't tell him starting.
So he's really come on, and it must have been a real sign of his maturity, because Kieran McKenna made him captain against Stoke on the weekend in the Premier League Cup game, and he's a first year. There were second years in the team, but he got the captaincy role, and by the way, he's a very good captain. So I was delighted for him because he's worked and grafted very, very well to get where he is.
He looked absolutely at home in that England side. Like I said, all of them did, and arguably Mason changed the game when he came off the bench to give him the number 10 shirt, give him Gomez's shirt, which, maybe there's a sign there. The final thing that we're going to talk about then is Angel Gomes hasn't signed his contract.
So I believe. It's
been on the table since August. It's now November. Do you think he's going to stay? Do you think he's going to go?
Nobody knows. You don't know, I don't know, the press don't know.
I've tried to find out as well.
the only 3 people who know probably is himself, obviously his dad, and maybe his agent. I don't know, unless his dad is his agent.
He doesn't have an agent.
He doesn't have an agent. So there are only a handful of people who probably know. I think what you have to do is you have to ask the question why. Why hasn't he signed his contract? So if you ask why he hasn't signed his contract, it could be the terms. So there's still some negotiations taking place in the terms of the contract. My understanding is one has been offered. So if a contract has been offered, then there's some terms in there. So he may be unhappy with some of those terms. That could be it. It could be a timing issue. There was an offer once he was offered his contract, because he's only allowed to sign a professional contract on your 17th birthday.
Which was the 31st of August.
Which was the 31st of August. Call it the 1st of September. There's been a lot going on.
Yeah, obviously the World Cup,
England
Cup,
duty, all that sort of stuff. So it could be a timing issue where he's basically been saying, him and his parents have said, look, forget all that for a second. Let's just concentrate on the World Cup. Let's concentrate on England. And then maybe, going back to some other things that have been in the press, maybe you, depending on how well you do in the World Cup, that might give you
a negotiational advantage.
An advantage if we're not happy with some of those terms, or it might change the game in some way. Who knows? So let's just wait and see what happens. Or there could be a third thing, which is there's a problem somewhere. There's a problem with the player. There's a problem with his desire or his motivation to be at Manchester United. There could be a problem with his relationship with the manager. There's some form of issue. I haven't heard that there's a problem with him and Kieran McKenna. I haven't heard of any fallout with the club. He's playing. As you know, he's been injured. He was injured quite a lot at the back end of last season. He's been injured. He's had slight knocks. I don't think he's at his best, by the way. I don't think he's been at his best since probably February, March last year. And then he got a knock. He came back, got a knock, had a period rehabilitation, went away with England. I don't think he's at his peak.
Which might have been why we saw so little of him at the World Cup, to be fair.
Yeah, it could have been that he wasn't at his best. Clearly one of the most talented footballers that we've had at our club for a long, long time. But there's other reasons why things aren't happening. And I think viewers and fans are very quick to say it's got to be this, this or this. When in actual fact, sometimes it's none of those things. It's just circumstantial. So...
can I just say, stop tweeting us every single time it's in the Metro that Barcelona have scouted him. Of course they've scouted him. Of course they've scouted him. Let's just say that, of course. If I had to put my gut feeling on it, I think he will sign.
I think so. He's a Manchester boy. He loves United. He's well thought of. He's already played in the first team. He's at 16 years old. He's probably the 4th or 5th youngest ever player to play in our first team. There's an opportunity there for him. He knows he will get first team games as long as he progresses. He doesn't know if he goes somewhere else. Regardless, and everybody's talking about his friends saying he's got friends all over the place. He's friends with everybody on Twitter.
He's got friends in the team right now that he's playing with.
Exactly.
He's not going to leave to go play with one in Germany.
So, and whether or not, you know...
I hope not.
Well, let's assume that Dortmund said, we will give you a first team chance. Well, United have said the same thing. And by the way, he's still got to perform over there. If he doesn't perform over there, he's back in their reserves. So you're either playing Dortmund's reserves or you're playing our reserves. I mean, it depends what you want. And I say this to lots of players, be careful what you wish for because you don't know what's going to happen. Be careful. And I'm with you. I think it's a timing issue. I think it's a circumstances issue. I think he will sign. I think there still may be some negotiation to do over whatever, we don't know. But eventually he'll sign because in his heart of hearts, I think he wants to stay at the club. Have I been wrong before? You bet. Will I be wrong in the future? Probably, no doubt. And I could get this one really wrong. I would be surprised if he went. I can't see why he would go.
The only thing I could say, Barcelona's a club that gets mentioned a lot. The only thing I could say is that he reminds me so much of Iniesta, that Barcelona seems such a good fit for him because I also think that league suits his style of play better. And him being a very small player, and that constant talk of Mourinho only favouring 6'4" McTominays, that at some point has to play on your mind as a very small player. But I think if he goes down what the route Aguero's took, which is get on the weights, get that low centre of gravity, you'll be able to hold people off, and you are one of the, if not the most technically gifted footballers I have ever seen. His vision is Scholes level, his touch and his awareness is absolutely fantastic. How many times do you reckon you've seen him sprint? 2, I reckon, maybe. No,
and he's not the quickest player, but he's quick up here.
He walks around the pitch because he's got so much time on the ball. I think that game intelligence that he's got elevates him above just technical players.
I agree with that. And also, I keep saying this, I don't think, even at United, I don't think size is important. Jesse Lingard's not the biggest of players.
Exactly.
Juan Mata's not the biggest of players. Ander Herrera's not the biggest of players. Luke Shaw's not the biggest of players. Oh, and by the way, there's all press reports we're interested in Danny Rose. He's not the biggest of players. So if we were only interested in big players, none of these lads would be getting games. So I kind of take that with a pinch of salt. I think if a player is good enough technically, tactically, emotionally in terms of maturity, then Mourinho will trust him.
And he can't go because then we won't see a midfield free of Pogba, Fosu Mensah and Angel Gomes, which has got to be the best homegrown midfield since the invention of midfields. Tony, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
This has been absolutely fantastic. Thanks to you guys for watching at home. If you've got any questions for myself or Tony, bang them in the comments and we will get them answered as best that we can. There's a lot of good stuff happening at the youth at the moment, if you ignore the 23s, and there's an exciting season to be had. I want to see a really good FA Cup youth run this year.
I think everyone's really nailed on for a good youth cup run. So
going out in
crossed.
The first round again. And,
fingers crossed.
Hopefully we have a bit of a run at the youth league as well, because that really should be something that Manchester United put a lot of priority to, I think, considering our history. So once again, thank you guys for joining us. Make sure to subscribe for some more youth reviews coming up in the future. Give it a like, and we'll see you in the next one. Laters.